Hacking, data, and identity theft are causing devastating problems. Privacy has arrived with Globex Data, the solution of choice for privacy and security in the digital world of communications. Switzerland has the world's strictest privacy laws, and Globex Data's Swiss-hosted platform is outside of big tech with no data mining. Globex Data is now launching in the USA, offering email and messaging privacy and security to everyone in the U.S. Globex Data Limited, stock trading symbol SWISF, web address globexdatagroup.com.
The proceeding may contain forward-looking statements which may not be realized.
From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. Larry Kudlow, WABC in New York. Great pleasure. It's time to look at the stock market. It's time to make some money. This is the Make Some Money segment, I guess. And we welcome David Bahnsen, founder and managing partner of the Bahnsen Group, and we welcome Don Luskin, the Chief Investment Officer of Trend Macro, two old friends. So, gentlemen, one thing you could do now. I'm of course very, very fearful of what's going to happen on the tax front, which I think is going to create considerable tax drag and economic drag and profits drag if and when that takes place. I find one really positive thing this week. One really positive thing. The unions got clobbered in Alabama at the Amazon warehouse union vote. It's about, 71-25. So that's very good because Biden's pro-union agenda. I'm not against private unions, by the way, but private unions, too, have become dominated by their left-wing leaders, if you will. And so I don't have any use for them. But I don't see much else. All the talk about the budget and taxes, and the PPI was very, very high. So everybody's screaming about inflation. I'm not sure I buy that yet either. But I'll let David Bahnsen tell me why the market went up 647 points on the Dow, 420 points on the NASDAQ, and 109 points on the S&P. The S&P is now 4,128.80. Now, that's a very cool number. The Dow's not so bad either, 33,800. These are just like interplanetary numbers. All right, David, why is this all happening?
Well, if you remember, the market was closed last Friday for Good Friday, and that was when you had the big employment number that came. And then you had a just fantastic ISM manufacturing, and later this last week, ISM services. Larry, you know this. The economy is doing great. Mm-hmm. It's opening. The vaccine's working. All the Operation Warp Speed successes are working their way through. And so the corporate profit expectations are going higher, and corporate profits are the mother's milk. And so the market's pricing that in. Is it getting a little high? Well, it's more than a little high in some sectors. Others are still kind of playing catch up. But I think the market is just reflecting a lot of economic optimism.
Don Luskin, I give you a whack at it. Another fabulous week in stocks, really fabulous week. Look, I'm long the indexes, so I'm fine with it. I'm not selling yet. But there's some storm clouds over the horizon. Anyway, you go ahead. Why is the market so strong and euphoric?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, Larry, make me a promise. Let me go first next time, okay? Because I'm going to say basically most of the same things that David just said. The economy's opening up, but it's more than just a recovery. It's a boom. We've had a year of deferred consumption and deferred human fellowship that's been accompanied by the largest accumulation of savings in the history of the world. At the same time, so it's been stimulus payments. It's been unemployment benefits that were paying people 25% more not to work than to work, and now they're able to work again. So this is going to be like when World War II is over. And Rosie the Riveter loses her job, but that's a good thing because the world's at peace. And now she doesn't have to buy beef with rationing tickets anymore. She can cash in her war bonds, get into a whole new cycle of household formation, and that's what creates epical economic cycles. This is completely unique, and I want to remind you that the economic profession, which is full of horrible, wrong macroeconomic predictions, the worst one it ever made was in 1945 when it was unanimous consensus that after World War II, the United States was going to fall right back into the Great Depression of the 1930s. And that's what everyone's saying now. It's just a damn wall of worry. But what we in fact have is a wall of money. Now, I am not an oblivious idiot. I know that there is certainly a chance that there will be higher taxes, maybe some, very inefficient growth corrosive taxes. But let's say that means instead of having a 10% real GDP year, we have an 8% real GDP year. I'm going to regret that. That 2% would put a lot of well-being in a lot of households, but 8%, man, that'll still be a record.
You're right. I know you're right. I know Bonson's right. I agree. It just seems too good. Actually, the best thing I've heard is that, as you noted, Donald, the economics profession is bearish. So right there, I should be very bullish and just stick with that. No, that's a very important point because they've all gone left-wing beyond Keynes, left-wing socialist. So there you have it. David Bunson, though, it's funny, when everybody is bullish, if you look back in investing history, if everybody is bullish, it's usually a danger sign.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that I am a pretty natural contrarian as well. And yet, when you look to some of the indicators, you still have had hundreds of billions of dollars flow into bond funds, not equity funds. A lot of the contrarian indicators are not out of control. Some are problematic. But, there's one thing that both Don and I probably forgot to mention, and all the different factors that explain market behavior this last week. And that is Joe Manchin coming out and saying, you're not getting a 28% corporate tax rate. Now, look, I don't want 25 either, but I think on the margin it points to something I've talked to you about a few times, Larry, and that is a lot of the stuff the Biden administration says, they're going to get a modified version of it, not the market worst-case version of it. And so let's say he ends up getting his infrastructure bill and he raises some taxes, but it's less than what the market had been worried about. You end up getting a 24, 25 corporate rate. That's higher than 21. That's not as supply side as you and I want, but it's not 28, and it sure as hell isn't 35.
At 25 plus state, we would be the number one highest corporate tax rate in the developed world. Just saying. Tax Foundation did these numbers.
Yeah.
You got to add on 4.7% average for the states. That plus 25. In other words, it ain't that great. We're losing ground. We're losing.
Oh, Larry, you poor naive fellow. Don't you know that Moody's Analytics says that all this is going to create 18 million new jobs?
Oh, I know.
There you go. Okay, so end of argument.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. You've got the Wharton-Penn model says going to lose jobs, knock out 1% of GDP, which is a lot, and take down wages. The Tax Foundation model is saying the same thing. And the National Association of Manufacturers just did one, a couple of economists from Rice University, same thing. You're going to lose ground. You're not going to get growth. You're not going to get jobs, just the reverse. So I know it only seems like a few points, but we're going wrong direction. And this business about the global minimum tax at 21% is a terrible body blow, really terrible body blow to profitability and competitiveness. So I think David Bonson is there's irrational exuberance here on how this story is going to turn out. I know Joe Manchin, he's a good man, but he's not going to save it. He's going to vote for a big corporate tax hike. All right. He may not vote for the biggest one on the block, but he's going to vote for a big one. That's all I'm saying, David.
No, and I agree with you, but I think that we're talking about market prices, and so these are marginal realities. In other words, we can be against any movement higher in the marginal rate, and you and I both are. But a 20% increase is more severe to markets than a 10% increase, or whatever the numbers end up being. And you're right, those state rates get added in and make the marginal burden higher, but those state rates are already there. So we're talking about the incremental differences to corporate profits and to incentives. And I think that incremental difference is going to be really, really dumb, a really bad idea, but less than what Biden has threatened us with. because of the 50-50 Senate. So I'm not being exuberant about it. I'm just sort of, well, first of all, I'm a happy warrior at heart. I can't help it. But I'm just trying to point to a little half-full part of the glass here.
Don Luskin, what'd you make of the labor defeat in Alabama?
Oh my God, my hands are sore from applauding so much. Look, I think everybody. I think that's. You were first talking about that in the setup at the top of the hour. It made me think that really maybe the message of the moment is that while the Biden administration and the media that's part of his ecosystem is pushing all the virtue of this extremely progressive agenda, the reality is that the American people, even the Democrats, they elected Joe Biden. They didn't elect Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Elizabeth Warren. The 50-50 Senate, that's just because of 14,000 votes in one state. Right now, all it would take is flipping 3 seats in the House to defeat any bill that goes through the House. America is a perfectly 50-50 divided world. And to the extent that the Democrats try to overplay that, they are to that very same extent setting themselves up for absolute doom in 2022. Now, they aren't stupid. They know that. So there are lots of senators, there are lots of congressmen on the Democratic side of the aisle who are not going to let this thing go crazy.
Well, that's the thing, Don. I agree. The stock market is smart, and it contains all available information. So this shift to this far leftism, could guarantee a GOP Congress next year. And that is very bullish. Only thing on that scenario that concerns me is what do they get through in the meantime? Because Democrats they're probably smarter at playing these inside baseball games than Republicans, and they're going to use 51 vote record.
May I just interject that we should remember the lesson from history on that, Larry? Which you're right. Obama knew he only had 2 good years, 2009 and 2010, and he rammed through Obamacare and Dodd-Frank, 2 of the biggest footprint pieces of legislation, and neither of them have been able to be pried loose 10 years later.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's the way Democrats think. David Bahnsen, you reading the stories yesterday and today, this morning, editorials about Mr. Biden's Supreme Court Reform Commission? Have you read those stories? If I can be blunter, it's called court packing, basically. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's more signaling and posturing to the far left. National Review put up a great editorial response to this. It's kind of like almost every single thing that President Biden's done since he got in. He's, at least in rhetoric, tried to give a nod to the most extreme, most progressive parts of his party. And then in some places he's put teeth on it with executive orders and that silly infrastructure bill and that silly COVID bill. So it's not good. It's not good what we're getting out of the West Wing. And Biden had an opportunity to basically come in and make a whole bunch of moderate independents really happy. And he didn't do it. And so I think that the positive side is exactly what you just said, and I think Don alluded to it. 2022 has the opportunity to be an incredible year for the Republicans because they can change legislation and they can change executive orders, but they cannot change the country. The country is not there on court packing and D.C. statehood and through-the-roof capital gain and corporate taxes. They're not there.
Let's switch back to the economy. Don Luskin, you had this PPI number come out. I'm not convinced there's a big inflation surge. Some people are. I'm not quite there yet because the dollar is still holding up pretty well. But what's your read? We're going to get CPI. I guess we get a batch of numbers this coming week, don't we? Get retail sales, CPI. I'm going to guess industrial production. What do you think?
Well, I'm on the inflation side. Big, no. Surge, won't deserve that word. But we've been through 12 or 13 years since the global financial crisis when every central bank in the world has struggled to try to get inflation up to 2% and has not been able to maintain it for more than a month or two. So if we were to get for, say 6 months to 2.5%, the media, which, makes its money by getting you all scared and excited, is, certainly make a big deal out of that. That's not exactly a secret. They're already making a big deal about it. Jerome Powell has been front-ending it by saying he fully expects it and intends not to react against it. So remember, one of the, the first-order worst things that happens when you get a bump in inflation is often central banks get very skittish about that, and they move too rapidly, too preemptively, without really seeing the whites of their eyes, and they use this sort of stupid old Phillips curve logic to, slow down the economy because it's overheating. Oh my God. And, the great thing is Jerome Powell has just said in advance, I'm just not going to do that. So the first risk is taken right off the table. Now, the second risk is that we would look back on it in the fullness of time and say, oh my God, the central bank should have intervened, but they didn't. Okay, well, maybe, but, we'll deal with that problem 2 years from now. So if I'm reading your vibe right, Larry, I think we're in the same camp. I'm just not that worried about it.
Yeah. But David Bahnsen, market interest rates, I know they stopped rising in recent weeks after a nice bulge, but if you get 10% growth in 2021, which we could get, maybe more conservatively 7 to 8%, but it's going to be big. Nominal GDP is going to grow a lot. You don't need a big inflation number to get there. Wouldn't that push, let's say, the 10-year rate up quite a bit?
Well, the problem is that the long rate is not going to respond at the end of the year to what took place in the post-COVID recovery. It's going to respond to longer-term expectations of growth, which are stunted by excessive government spending and stupid government policies, like tax increases and other things like that. We had 3.1% real GDP trendline growth for 50 years, and we've not been able to get it back since the financial crisis, except for when there were supply-side tax cuts and deregulation coming out of the White House and some really smart people at the National Economic Council. I won't say who some of those may have been. So, Larry, this is the problem, that we can't get this higher bond yield because we can't get our growth back to where it needs to be. We have a 1.65 10-year, and people are talking about inflation. I know Don and I feel the same on this issue. It's so stupid that it boggles the mind. We do not have runaway inflation, and the reason we know that is because the bond market's telling you. Moving up from 1% to barely over 1.5% is just reflecting a little bit of the good news of economic growth. And to his point, Jay Powell does get this, and what the Fed also now gets, that Greenspan resisted for a long time and Bernanke resisted, but now they have it programmed in their souls. If we ever get inflation, Paul Volcker told us what to do about it. But if we get deflation, none of us know what the hell to do about it.
Interesting. Conservatives are so split on this. I'm reading Larry Lindsay and Kevin Hassett, to some extent Ed Hyman, who's not really a political guy, but he's a conservative thinker. They're quite worried about inflation, maybe transitory or worse. I've spoken to some of my former colleagues in the Trump administration they're not worried about 8 or 10% inflation, but they are worried about 4 or 5% inflation, which would be a quantum jump. It's just interesting to me. People are split on this issue. Don Luskin, to make us some money, what would you recommend to our listeners in this euphoric environment?
Oh, well, I think what I would do is I would try to get a little, focus the microscope down a little bit and look for those parts of the market that aren't euphoric. Clearly, bonds aren't euphoric. Nothing euphoric about a, 165 10-year yield. So, so if you think that there's more euphoria to come, find the parts of the market that aren't reflecting it, assume they will, and take advantage. So that would mean, find some way to stop owning those bonds or short them if you can. Try to find sectors that haven't completely recovered yet. Transportation, lodging, energy. Those are the ones where these stocks are still acting like there's a depression on because it has been a K-shaped recovery. Now, that's not unique. All recoveries are K-shaped recovery. There are always winners and losers. There are always ones leading and ones lagging. But the market isn't sure that some of these industries are ever coming back. Well, I guarantee you they are so totally coming back, and they're still waiting for you to buy those stocks.
And, David, what investment advice would you give?
Well, I'm in the camp of folks that will always want to be selective in equity exposure. I'm never really wanting to buy the whole entire market, and certainly not at a 25 times PE S&P, and with a lot of expensive technology stuff out there. So we're selective. We like some of the consumer staples, good dividend growers with great balance sheets that are really not at all frothy or expensive. Frankly, there's still some underpriced energy stuff, and what people don't get is Biden's helping the big energy companies. What he's doing is killing the little guy. But the big Chevrons and Exxons all benefit from this kind of crony capitalism stuff he's doing. So we like that. If the yield curve is going to widen a bit more, there's no reason not to keep owning some of the financials. So the theme, I guess I'd answer with Larry, is selective, high-quality equity exposure that's mostly U.S.-centric. I still don't think you can go into Europe much, Japan. We like the U.S. a lot more.
Asia's strong, though, isn't it, gentlemen? China leading the way. China's V-shaped recovery.
You had Alibaba this week. They threw a $2.8 billion fine on them. So there is strong recovery there. But as far as getting that equity exposure, I still just have a hard time trusting communists. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, can we just agree on one thing, that you shouldn't buy equities in countries where there are no property rights?
Amen. Amen.
I'm fine with that. What about Japan?
Well, I'm finally finding a point of disagreement. On the principle that you want to find places where there's been less exuberance, where you're on the downstroke of the K and the upstroke of the K, the United States, because of the extraordinary amount of stimulus and relief that we've put out, and just because of the resilience of our economy, and because we got the vaccine thing right, we're leading the pack in the recovery. So this is going to be a multi-speed recovery, where the UK and the US lead it, and everybody else is struggling. So Europe, Japan, they're all going to be 3 months, 6 months behind. So, consistent with my buy the laggards theme, that's what I'd do.
Dave Bunsen, yes, of course, the vaccine is the most powerful stimulus because that's leading to the reopen of the entire economy, and that's the best supply side incentives we can muster. We're still operating under Trump rules, by the way. Biden wants to change them and reverse them, but we still have low taxes and we still have low minimal regulations and we still have a powerful energy sector. Whether any of that or all of it gets changed remains to be seen. But the other side, distinguished thinkers, many of them, will argue that it was the stimulus package, the $1.9 trillion stimulus package, and the stimulus package to be on infrastructure that's really going to prove conclusively that demand-side government spending works and that, in fact, tax hikes are not a problem. What are you going to say to that when people bring that up to you at various lunches and dinners and forums or even National Review Institute meetings?
Well, Larry, if you're asking me, what I'm going to say is that the stimulus program that was done a year ago was not a stimulus program. It was a relief program. This government made the mistake, like all world governments did, of causing an economic depression in the failed hope, as it turns out, of controlling coronavirus. So they created the depression. They had to pay everybody off. But, that wasn't a world of, industrial policy and government spending and everything. That was just giving unemployed people, the benefits they needed to put food on the table. So, that's fine. It's this stuff coming up that's so terrifying. I mean, my favorite meme of the week is, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I call it infrastructure.
Oh, God, yes, I know. But you see, the favorite meme, David Bunsen, that's going to be an important rallying cry. See, it worked. See, it worked. What worked? Top-down stimulus, big government spending, accompanied by tax hikes that won't really slow anything down. See, it worked. That's what other teams going to say.
Right, and I think that they would say that anyways from a purely partisan standpoint. The amount of tribalism that has leaked over into economics just can't be allowed to get us down. I mean, people are always – look at what they've done with Operation Warp Speed, right? Well, see, that worked, but they don't want to give it credit. And then the idea of giving $1,400 to someone making $100,000 a year who was already employed, and they're going to say, "See, that got Netflix's stock up." I mean, it's so dumb. It doesn't really require a response. However, I think on a macro basis, you've been fighting this battle for 30, 40 years. What we do when people try to discredit supply-side truths or whether they try to credit Keynesian components is we have to win the argument and just patiently and joyfully make the case. And there's no rational argument coming that this demand-side frothy transfer payment creates economic growth. And if we have to go back to first things, that's what guys like Don and I and you will do. You can't create wealth by transferring it from one party to another. We need to create wealth. We need high productivity. It's better for human dignity, and it's better for the economy.
You know, I love that, of course. I had at the top of the show, former Ways and Means Chairman, now ranking Republican Kevin Brady of the House. And he's a pretty determined fellow. And he's got the Republican staff, you know, cranking out a lot of memos almost on a daily basis, fighting the left-wing arguments and defending the achievements of the tax cut of 2017, which was, of course, administration, but it was also we had the House and we had the Senate as well, and he was a key factor. So they're pretty feisty. It looks to me like they're going to fight it, and they're going to fight the rhetoric too, Don Luskin. I think that's important.
Oh, it is. I mean, the Republicans have learned something from the Democrats over the last 4 years. It's just one word: resist.
Yeah. Good. Right. That's it. That's what I was striving for. You're exactly right. Resist. I love that. Resist. I wouldn't mind seeing a little. I'm always a congenital bull. Everybody knows that, but I wouldn't mind seeing a little stock market revolt against high taxes. Just wouldn't mind seeing it, Dave Bonson.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know.
I wouldn't either. But you know what?
Stock market vigilantes.
Yeah, no, and I think you might get it, but we have to actually see them have the guts to come out and say what they're going to do. And that has to come from Biden, it has to come from Ron Klain, it has to come from Jen in a press release. So all the people writing articles about what they're going to do, the stock market's not going to revolt against that. It's when they actually put pen to paper. And what did they do with infrastructure? He came out and said, we're doing this infrastructure bill and we're going to do corporate taxes. He didn't touch capital gains. He didn't touch LLCs. He didn't touch marginal rates.
That's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming.
He's breaking it up into a second thing.
Yes,
so
that's coming. And you're going to hate it.
We have to respond.
You're going to hate what's coming.
I just want Joe Manchin to hate it. I don't care if I hate it. I need Joe Manchin to hate it.
But ask yourself, why are they breaking it up like this? They're breaking it up because they believe that, you know, ordinary, stupid, sheep-like people who are just happy that Biden isn't Trump, they're going to let slip through big tax hikes on evil multinational corporations who aren't them, right? But when it comes time to tell people that your FICA wages are going to get uncapped and all the other stuff that they're talking about doing, capital, eliminating basis step up and all this stuff, now ordinary people are going to say, "Oh my God, this was a gun that was aimed at me, not just that big evil corporation." So look, they're never going to get there. They are prioritizing. They're trying their best to get through the stuff that they maybe can get through, and they're deferring till the honeymoon is over stuff that they probably just know they can't get through.
You know, class warfare is so yesterday. Class warfare is like so Soviet Union. It's so Das Kapital and Karl Marx, 1867. I just can't believe class warfare will win. It never does. You get a whack at it, and then it gets stuffed right back down again. I just can't. It's just so yesterday, class warfare. It's so boring. Telling people that they can't succeed, it's not good.
But see, that's why they've turned it. That's why they've taken all of those same dynamics and rebranded them the war against white supremacy. Because I don't know anybody in the upper classes who is ashamed of the money he's made with the sweat of his own back. But I know that there are a lot of good Americans who don't have a racist bone in their body and are so, have so much moral rectitude that if somebody accuses them of being a racist, they'll at least stop and think about it because they don't want to be that, right? And so they've found something that is a guilt trip in a way that class warfare isn't. And it's very effective right now. It's a little scary. Somebody it's very hard to stand up against, too.
David Bahnsen, can you elect a Republican governor in California?
No, we cannot, and I don't say that because I'm a doom and gloom guy or not up for the fight. I'm just being totally realistic on the demographics. Not only can we not do it, but all resources and money that goes into trying to do it right now will be wasted when they could be spent, getting a, let's say, Florida Republican governor in the White House or something like that. I mean, at the end of the day, I want Gavin gone. I think it's been a disaster. Yet we know you're losing elections by 20%. When Bill Simon lost to Gray Davis, you remember this. I think you used to have Bill Simon on your show.
Yep.
He lost by 2%. And then we recalled Gray Davis with one of the world's biggest celebrities running against him, right? It's just a different deal now. And by the time these guys get to vote, a lot of the rage against Gavin will unfortunately have calmed down a little. Schools will be back open. Thanks to the Supreme Court today, churches are going to be back open. So, no, Gavin's not going to go anywhere, and the state is not ready for that change, but it will come. It's just going to take more time for the foolishness of these Democrat policies to play out.
All right, gentlemen. I appreciate very much David Bahnsen, Don Luskin. Great stuff. Folks, stay around. We're going to do some money and politics next. I'll be right back.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Folks, Larry Kudlow here. Money and politics. Liz Peek, Fox News contributor and columnist for The Hill. And I see this. Look at this, www.lizpeek.com. That may or may not be new, but it showed up on my sheet. Steve Moore, author of Trumponomics, where the introduction really sold the book. He's also working with FreedomWorks and the fabulous Unleash Prosperity Daily Hotline, which is really great stuff. Liz, reading your column, the New York City suicide mission should alarm the entire nation. I had Michael Goodwin on earlier. I'm not sure I can take another segment on the downfall of New York City. I mean, I'm ready to go out and hang myself.
Well, I think what's so upsetting about it, Larry, is not just that progressives and Democrats generally are paying no attention to how their policies actually impact real cities, real people, et cetera, how it drives away employers, raises taxes, and therefore drives away individuals and leaves their cities fiscally much, much worse off. No one seems to actually care about the real-life data that we have that are pretty convincing that this bail reform and higher taxes and all these things progressives have put in have really had serious consequences. But the thing is, it's happening in other cities too. It's not just New York. And for the life of me, I cannot understand how New York legislators, faced with actually plugging the budget hole in New York because of federal money coming from the rescue plan, the American Rescue Plan, how could they think that raising taxes was a good idea?
Because they're all socialists.
I can't understand it.
They're all class warfare socialists.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. No, I mean it. You think Steve Moore, Reagan used to always say, though, somebody should turn off something. You're interfering, whether it's TV or something.
There you go.
Thank you. So, Steve Moore, when Reagan was confronted with pessimism, let's say like Liz Peek and Michael Goodwin are with regard to New York City, Reagan used to always say, okay, you've shown me the manure. Now, where's the pony? All right, Steve, where's the pony in this story?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, look, I agree exactly with Liz that this is like some kind of badge of honor for liberals that they're raising taxes through the roof. Even, by the way, when New York City and state admit they don't even need the revenue. So what is the point of this? It's the point of just soaking the rich. Our friend Art Lapper says a good tax system tries to make poor people rich, not rich people poor. And sometimes I really think the liberals have it upside down. They really are trying to make rich people poor. And so I think some silver lining here is the reason you're hearing background noise. I'm in Florida right now, Larry, and a little wind by the beach. But my gosh, Florida is so booming. I mean, it is incredible. It's the biggest boom I've ever seen. There's no houses for, you can't buy a house here. The restaurants are packed. People do social distance and wear masks. But the point is, when you get the policies right, it's not that complicated. You can see real prosperity, and it's happening here in Florida. It's just not happening in New York. And I got to tell you, all people are talking about in Florida right now is how stupid people are in New York.
It's true. That is true. I've heard that too.
I like that.
Here's a corker. This is being done at a time when it has been shown over the past year that a great many people can work outside of New York. They do not have to be in Manhattan to do deals and to sell real estate and all kinds of other businesses. So they're jeopardizing the city at a time where it is perhaps most vulnerable, not just because of rising street crime and things that are making people move away. It has been said the only thing that really drives people out of a city is crime, and I would agree with that. If you're not feeling safe, you're not going to go back. But honestly, this remote working phenomenon, it won't work for every industry, and a lot of companies are going to want to pull people back, but it's definitely going to make a change. And I think for many, many reasons, this increased tax and complete oblivious response to what's going on the street level in New York City and not opening the schools, wow, what a recipe for disaster.
Steve.
Well, let me just add, can I just add one thing to what Liz just said? Because this is important. I mean, the victims, so look, New York suffers as many cities do. My home city of Chicago, which, as you know, Larry, I love Chicago. It's a great, great city. But it's being destroyed by the same thing, progressivism. And here's the point. Who is hurt by the bad schools? Who is hurt by the crime on the street? Who is hurt, Larry, by the high taxes? Not the rich people, they leave. The people who are going to suffer in New York are going to be the lowest income people who are stuck behind. They're the people who suffered the most from the rioting because those property values in those low-income immigrant neighborhoods are falling.
So, Lee Zeldin is running for governor of New York. And he's a very smart guy, and he's a very articulate guy. So I'm just thinking, as you two are talking, that he ought to run on the Florida model, and distinguish between the Florida model and the New York model. The Florida model is low taxes, school choice, plenty of law and order, minimal regulations. They like business. The New York model is not working. I mean, you've got half of Florida's from New York anyway, so it would probably resonate. I mean, I think that, Liz, we need to tell that to Lee Zeldin. The Florida model. We can coin that.
I think that's actually very smart because Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has obviously become a national figure because his state has been so successful. He clearly is so dangerous, or he's so threatening to Democrats that they're now engaged in hit pieces like the one we saw on 60 Minutes. They're going to be going after Ron DeSantis nonstop because, among other things, it's like Trump beating Hillary Clinton. Ron DeSantis has embarrassed Andrew Cuomo. He has embarrassed Gavin Newsom and all the other blue state Democrats who have failed so badly over the last year and indeed over the last several years. So I think you're right. I think, it works and the other doesn't work. It's very simple.
Yeah, Zeldin and DeSantis are pals, by the way, from the House. Steve Moore, I want to switch gears a little bit. You have to explain to me, President Biden and Treasury Secretary Yellen are running around saying the reason we have to raise taxes is because until now there's been a race to the bottom regarding tax cuts. Like everyone in the world is going to zero, and we have to stop this. Would you just explain this to me? Where are there zero tax rates? I wish there were, by the way. And what is this race to the bottom stuff?
Well, it's a race. It is a race. It's not a race to the bottom. It's a race to the top. And under Donald Trump, thanks to great economists like you, we were winning that race, right? I mean, we were importing, how much imported capital? Did it, like $1 trillion or something like that it was just free money from cutting the rates and lowering the repatriation tax and making America more competitive. So we were winning the race because we were putting America first. And by the way, I think it was you, Larry, who said on your show this week that Ireland is at 12.5% on the corporate rate.
And they won't.
If we go to 33%, this isn't complicated, folks. If we're at 12.5% and they're at 33, I mean, if we're at 33 and they're at 12.5, you're going to have the Empire State Building in Dublin, Ireland.
We're going to have higher tax rates than France. That's
right.
Almost unimaginable. We're going to have higher tax rates than France.
Russia and Sweden have lower corporate rates than we do.
So,
China does.
Yeah, well, they will. That's correct.
Right.
So we had the highest corporate rate pre-Trump. Then the Trump tax cuts moved it down, so we had the 14th highest. Nobody went to zero. Most of these corporate taxes have come down. They're in the 20s someplace. If we go the Biden route, according to the Tax Foundation, state and federal will be back to number one. The U.S. will be number one in corporate taxes. That's a dubious burden. So I just don't understand this logic of race to the bottom. I'm just looking. Yellen is going to ruin her reputation with this kind of phony stuff.
I think that's right, Larry. I think she comes across as an academic who is very beholden to and partial to these multinational agreements and accords, most of which have really never produced anything for the United States, certainly, because we always end up being the group that's giving away more than we gain. But she somehow thinks that she's going to convince a whole group of nations to reform their own tax codes so as to benefit the United States. It's pretty astonishing, and I think actually her star is falling for a lot of reasons right now, including the fact that apparently she really doesn't communicate very well with others in the administration, and she has left behind, it seems to me, whatever kind of middle-of-the-road approach she takes to fiscal sanity. I mean,
yes.
that's gone forever.
That's correct. And she's, unfortunately, with respect to data points, she's declaring a lot of falsehoods, stuff that's easily checked. And I think, look, I know this. You got to go out there and you defend your boss, but there comes a time when you have to be, dead serious with credibility on facts and figures. You just have to be. Otherwise, you won't have any credibility.
There's another point, which is that and it's timely, which is, that one of the great economists of the 20th century, Robert Mundell, died last weekend. And he was famous for many things, but I think one of his most famous and important, pioneering insights was that capital flows to where it's most nicely treated.
Right.
It's, if you have high regulations and high punitive taxes on capital, what Mundell showed was that the capital would leave. And of course that's true. And so the left is now kind of conceding the point, and they're saying, well, we're going to just raise taxes everywhere in the world.
Well, they won't.
Have countries that will.
They won't.
They won't do it.
Europe will never go.
China isn't going to play with that.
That's right.
They'd love to suck our capital out of our country. So,
and the Europeans, the OECD stuff, they will never go to a 21% global minimum tax. Never, never, never. They're talking about 11 or 12%. Okay, not 21. So the idea that we're going to persuade them. And again, France is at the center of this. Bruno Le Maire, very smart guy, their finance minister. They're cutting corporate taxes. They're not going to raise the minimum tax. No way to 21%. I do want to raise this point, though, to both of you. I'll just put it out there. One thing that people who believe in free enterprise and free markets have to assert is that class warfare is wrong. It doesn't exist. That investment and capital investment is the worker's best friend. So let me just say this as simply as I can. You all can tear it apart if you want. But look, everybody wants to create good-paying jobs. But you can't have a good-paying job without a healthy, growing business. And you can't have a healthy, growing business unless it's properly financed by investors, or companies or entrepreneurs. So that there's no split between labor and capital. Karl Marx was dead wrong, and we should have learned that. Investment is labor's best friend, Liz. It's just that simple.
Well, I think the economic theory behind that is that by investing, you increase productivity, and that productivity gain translates into higher wages for workers. One of the great things that happened under President Trump began to turn around corporate investment, and you saw that pretty directly within about like 18 months lag, I think it was, in terms of wages going up. But Larry, I think you're asking a lot of the right questions. The basic question is Biden talks about wanting to create American jobs by manufacturing all the things we need for a green economy. How can you actually attract businesses to invest in the United States to make things that are now made in Asia or in Europe, like solar panels, when we're raising taxes and increasing all kinds of regulations, and including, by the way, regulations that will add to power costs? How is that supposed to happen? Is he going to mandate that businesses create manufacturing plants here? You can't do that, I don't think. So what do you see him doing that actually would lead to that outcome?
See, I think the problem here is they just don't believe in it. They don't believe in the need for a hospitable investment climate, as Steve mentioned. They don't understand. Steve, remember we used to use the term the global race for capital. Do you remember that?
Right.
The Bidens don't understand the global race for capital. Instead, they're running around, the president, everybody yelling too, that there's a race to the bottom. I mean, I don't know literally what they're talking about, Steve.
Well, I would say this, that this was, who wrote that book? It was Quicksilver Capital. It was one of the major CEOs, one of the great CEOs. I'll look it up. I forget his name, but he was established. But anyway, you're right. Capital is instantaneous. With a click of a button, you can move capital out of one country into another in these Quicksilver Capital markets. And, my mentor was Dick Armey. Do you remember Dick Armey?
Sure.
Sure. And he was famous for Army's axioms. And one that just always stuck in my mind was that, he said, liberals love jobs, but they hate employers.
Yeah, right.
And, it's true. Right. You can't have one without the other. Right. I mean, it's not complicated.
That's what I'm getting at, actually, capital and labor together. Just scanning other stuff. Liz Peek, are you keeping track now of this goofy Supreme Court commission? This is court packing. This is the beginning of an attempt to pack the court.
Larry, this is the moment where I honestly think I'm losing my mind, because I really am ready to march on Washington. I'm actually completely serious. I mean, Republicans are always – I was so incensed to see Darrell Issa, a very good guy, Republican representative from California, issue a tweet that basically sort of said it's regrettable. Regrettable? What kind of word is regrettable? This is outrageous. And I really think – that this could be a turning point. I mean, Kim Strassel wrote a very good article yesterday in the Journal about Kevin McCarthy and other Democrats raising tons of money from small donors. The corporate PAC money, guess what, is going to Biden. Small individual donations have swelled the coffers of Republicans. That means people are getting engaged. And I really believe that the Republican Party needs to get angry. It needs to, if need be, to turn out on the streets and protest this stuff. If you think about the word activist, that's a Democrat. That's always a Democrat. Why don't we have Republican activists? And if any issue could basically sway this country in a really profound way, I think this is it.
Steve, court packing, and the near cousin to court packing is the filibuster debate. Because if you blow up the filibuster, Katie barred the door, what gets through. And, of course, if you pack the court, which I think will be incredibly unpopular like it was with FDR, but in any case, if you pack the court, then Katie barred the door. Everything will be ideological. Nothing will be constitutional.
So this was exactly the point I was going to make, is that in addition to, what you guys were just talking about the court packing, you have the Democrats wanting to change the rules of elections, right, in a way that will get rid of voter ID and things that ensure integrity in elections, which is what we all want. And then they want to get rid of the filibuster rule, which is, our whole constitutional system is really based on protecting the rights of the majority. We are not a democracy in this country. We are not a democracy. We are a representative republic that protects the rights of the minority. And I'm just surprised, Larry and Liz, that the Democrats are so short-sighted that they don't see this could be used against them in a way that would be very harmful to them when they're in the minority.
You know, there's a speculation that this is all of these things are happening because Chuck Schumer is panicked about AOC making a primary bid for his seat. The biggest unknown question in Washington, truly, maybe, Larry, you know the answer to this, is who is driving the Biden bus? You know, is it Obama? I don't think it is Obama. Is it Ron Klain? Many people think it's Chuck Schumer because AOC has kind of, as we all know, mused about presenting a challenge to him. The progressive left is very energized and would put a lot of money towards that, and he is fending it off with allowing all this stuff to go forward. I think it is a catastrophe for Democrats. I think they will get blasted in 2022. I surely hope so. But I think maybe that's where it's coming from. I can't imagine otherwise.
Yeah, it's coming from Schumer, but it's really coming from Bernie Sanders and AOC because the far left is reigning very high right now. And Nancy Pelosi, too. I mean, Nancy Pelosi wasn't always this kind of lefty, but she is now. So the progressive leftism is very powerful, and I think it will doom them next year. But then again, we don't know that. That's just an opinion.
We don't.
And right now, the stock market is saying, don't worry. It's not going to happen. All right? But I keep asking people, all our stock market geniuses, really, are you being a little bit exuberant right now? I mean, you see what's out there, Steve Moore? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be a bear, but gee whiz, if this stuff goes through, it can't be good for stocks or companies or investment or wealth creation or anything.
Well, everybody's betting on America right now, and historically that's not a bad bet. But I agree with you that these new rules. I mean, this is what this is like a banana republic. When a new strongman comes in, this is what they do. They change all the rules, so they can do what they want. I mean, again, I don't understand why. I know a lot of Democrats listen to your show, Larry. Come on, you can't. Democrats out there, you can't be for this. This is outrageous. It's just trampling the rights of them, changing all the rules in the middle of the game. It's like being the banker in Monopoly, and then you just keep taking $100 bills out of the bank to win the game. That's essentially what they're doing.
Well, I surely hope a lot of Democrats listen to the show. Also, I hope
I know they do. I got
supreme.
Democratic friends who listen to your show, and they're the ones. They're the ones who have to speak out against this.
Yes.
Well, you'll have to persuade Robert Wolf. Anyway, Steve Moore, thank you. Liz Peek, thank you, as always. Folks, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, please join us every Saturday. I'm Kudlow, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We will see you next weekend.